The Whispering Pines. Location: Black Forest, Colorado. Date: October 13th, 2023. I drove up a narrow, winding path leading into the heart of Black Forest, Colorado. My friend had told me the cabin was cozy, a perfect spot to escape and recharge. But the moment I arrived, I couldn't shake an odd feeling that clung to the air. As I stepped out of my car, the towering pines swayed in silence around me, their shadows stretching like skeletal fingers across the dirt road. A chilling breeze swept through, sending a shiver down my spine that I quickly brushed off as the mountain air. The cabin itself was small, rustic, hidden behind layers of ivy and moss. Its wood was dark, weathered by years of solitude, and the single window in the front seemed to stare out like a solitary, unblinking eye. I shook my head, laughing at myself. I'd been overworked and stressed, and now my imagination was getting the best of me. This was exactly why I needed this break. I grabbed my bags from the trunk, my footsteps crunching over brittle leaves as I made my way to the front door. The cabin was locked, but the key was exactly where my friend said it would be, tucked beneath a loose stone beside the entrance. When I unlocked the door, it opened with a low, groaning creak, revealing a dim interior. Dust motes danced in a thin shaft of light, drifting lazily over well-worn furniture. A leather armchair, a rickety coffee table, a faded tapestry hanging against the wall. Once inside, I took a deep breath, trying to settle the nervous energy bubbling within me. Yet there was something off, a lingering smell that I couldn't quite place. Earthy, but faintly metallic. I wandered into the small kitchen to make coffee, hoping that the warmth would calm my nerves. As I waited for the water to boil, I caught a glimpse of something carved into the table, rough letters etched into the wood. They were faint, almost faded with age. Leave now. I frowned, tracing the words with my finger. They looked old, like they'd been there for years. But the warning felt strangely personal, like a whisper just for me. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and for a brief moment, I could almost swear it was whispering my name. Like and subscribe for more videos. Tell me where you're from in the comments. The second night in the cabin felt colder, heavier. Shadows draped over the corners of the room as the sun sank behind the pines, leaving me alone in that pocket of eerie silence. I tried to focus on a book I'd brought along, flipping through pages without actually reading a word. My eyes kept drifting to the kitchen table, to those carved words. Leave now. They haunted me, tugging at the edges of my mind like a persistent itch. The etching looked worn, yes, but there was something else about it. Something recent. A few fine splinters lay beside it, as if someone had traced over the letters not too long ago. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe some prank by a previous visitor, a sick attempt to scare the next lonely soul who stayed here. But that didn't stop the creeping unease in my chest. I decided to brush it off with an early night, hoping sleep would wash away the unsettled feeling. But sleep didn't come easy. I lay in bed, listening to the stillness, a silence so deep it felt unnatural, like the forest itself was holding its breath. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, a rhythmic reminder of just how alone I was. Then, just as I was starting to drift off, I heard it, a faint creak from the walls. It was soft at first, barely noticeable, but then it grew louder, traveling from one corner of the cabin to another, as if someone were walking inside the walls. I bolted upright, straining to hear more, my heart pounding. The sound came again, a slow, dragging scrape, followed by a soft thud, right beneath the floorboards. I held my breath, listening, but the noise faded, replaced by that oppressive silence. I told myself it must be an animal, maybe a raccoon or something nesting nearby, but deep down, I knew it felt different, intentional even. Just as I was calming myself, I caught a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. Across the room, near the window, a shadow moved, shifting away as though it had been watching me. I froze, unable to look away. When I finally managed to get up and check, there was nothing, just the whispering pines swaying outside, like silent, watchful sentries around the cabin. The next morning, I woke to a strange feeling, like I'd been watched all night. It was barely light outside, but I felt an overwhelming urge to get out of the cabin. The carved warning on the kitchen table was etched into my mind, and every shadow in the small space felt like it was creeping closer. I threw on my jacket and stepped outside, hoping the cold air would shake me out of my paranoia. The forest was thick with mist, a heavy blanket that clung to the pines, making everything look dreamlike and distorted. I decided to explore a little, thinking a walk might help clear my mind. The cabin sat in a clearing, surrounded by trees that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. As I walked deeper into the woods, the silence grew denser, muffling even the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. About a half-mile from the cabin, I stopped, struck by an uneasy sensation that I wasn't alone. Slowly I turned, scanning the fog-draped trees. At first I saw nothing, just shadows and branches blending into a murky canvas. But then, between two trees, I spotted it. A figure stood there, still as stone, half hidden in the mist. It was tall and dark, without a face or any distinct features, just a shadowy outline that seemed to bleed into the fog. My breath caught in my throat as I locked eyes. Or at least, I thought I did. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound, but there was something undeniably menacing about it. An unspoken threat, like it was daring me to come closer. I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the light, an illusion formed by the morning mist. But no matter how many times I blinked or looked away, the shadow remained, anchored in place, watching me. The silence pressed down on me, thick and suffocating. I took a slow, shaky step back, and as I did, the figure seemed to shift, leaning forward ever so slightly, as if it was ready to follow. Panic seized me, and I turned and ran, the fog swallowing my frantic breaths. Every step felt like it echoed through the trees, as if something else was mirroring my pace. When I finally reached the cabin, I slammed the door behind me, my chest heaving. Outside, the pines swayed in the wind, whispering as if they knew something I didn't. That night, a storm rolled in, trapping me inside the cabin as rain hammered against the roof and wind howled through the trees. I huddled near the fireplace, the faint warmth doing little to shake the chill that had settled in my bones. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see that shadowy figure lurking just beyond the glass. My heartbeat was steady but heavy, like a drumbeat echoing through the silence of the cabin. Around midnight, as the storm's fury reached its peak, an unnatural sound sliced through the night, freezing me in place. It was a howl, long and guttural, rising above the wind and rain, filling the air with a chilling resonance. It wasn't the howl of any animal I'd ever heard. It sounded wrong, almost like a human scream twisted into something primal and monstrous. I tried to dismiss it, convincing myself it was just the storm, or maybe an echo carrying from somewhere far off. But then, the howl came again, louder, closer. It seemed to roll through the trees, winding around the cabin like an invisible, creeping fog. I felt the sound in my chest, like a cold hand gripping my heart, each pulse in sync with the eerie wail. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my flashlight and approached the window, pressing my forehead against the cold glass to peer outside. Rain streaked down, blurring my view, but as I scanned the tree line, I saw something move between the pines. A tall, dark figure stood just within the reach of my light, shrouded in mist and shadows. It seemed to blend into the trees, almost as if it was a part of the forest itself. As I stared, the figure slowly turned its head toward me, its faceless silhouette somehow radiating a sense of deep, malevolent awareness. Then, as if responding to my gaze, it unleashed another howl, a low, echoing sound that rattled the windows and sent a shiver down my spine. I stumbled back from the glass, heart pounding. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, silent, watching me. I couldn't tell if it was waiting or simply enjoying my terror. My mind raced with questions, none of which had answers. What was it? Why was it here? And most chillingly, how long had it been watching me? By morning, the storm had passed, but the cabin felt colder, as if it had absorbed the dark energy of the night before. I barely slept, haunted by memories of that unearthly howl and the shadowy figure lurking among the pines. I wanted to leave, to get as far from this place as possible. But the thick, sticky fear in my chest kept me rooted there, trapped in the mystery that clawed at my mind. In a desperate search for answers, I began to go through the cabin, looking for anything that might explain the strange happenings. My search led me to an old weathered trunk in the bedroom, hidden beneath a tattered quilt and layers of dust. Inside was a mess of papers, some yellowed with age, others torn or water-stained. But tucked into one corner was a journal, its cover cracked and leathery, the name Thomas barely legible on the front. I opened the journal, flipping through pages filled with shaky handwriting that seemed to deteriorate over time, the letters growing larger, messier, as if written in haste. Thomas's words painted a disturbing picture. He described his own stay in the cabin, hearing strange sounds at night, glimpsing shadowy figures in the forest. He wrote about a creeping dread that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day, suffocating him with its invisible weight. One entry stood out, dated October 8th, 1994. "They come with the wind," he'd written, "and leave with the dawn. They whisper in the trees, calling my name. I tried to leave yesterday, but something held me here. I know now that they don't want me to go. They're waiting for something." Another entry, written a few days later, was even more chilling. "The pines watch. They're alive. They know." His writing grew desperate. "Don't trust what you see. Trust what you feel. They twist reality, make you doubt. They need you afraid. It's how they feed." I felt a cold sweat form on my brow. Thomas's last entry was a scrawled warning. "If you're reading this, it's too late. They're already inside." I slammed the journal shut, heart pounding. The words seemed to echo in my mind, and I could feel an oppressive presence settling over me, like eyes watching from every corner of the cabin. My pulse raced as a thought lodged itself in my head, stubborn and unshakable. Thomas had never left. Nightfall came quickly, swallowing the last threads of daylight and plunging the cabin into a dense, shadowed silence. I couldn't shake Thomas's words from my mind. "They're already inside." I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see a dark figure lurking in the corner or a faint outline watching me from the window. I turned on every light in the cabin, hoping it would keep the darkness at bay, but the electric hum only heightened the silence around me. Just as I was beginning to calm down, I heard a whisper. It was soft, barely a breath, but unmistakable. A voice, faint and fragmented, like someone speaking from the other side of a thin wall. My heart stopped. I strained to listen, holding my breath, but the whisper faded. I told myself it was my mind playing tricks, an echo of Thomas's warnings still clinging to my subconscious. But then it came again, this time louder, distinct enough to make out a single word: run. The word sent a jolt of fear through me. I stood frozen in the center of the room, every nerve on edge, listening as more whispers began to rise from the walls, the floors, the very air around me. They were voices, many voices, overlapping in a garbled, ghostly chorus. Some pleaded, others murmured, and a few sounded like desperate cries for help. "Stay away. Turn back. Don't look." Each warning seemed to echo the others, blending into a twisted symphony of fear. I clamped my hands over my ears, trying to drown out the voices, but they only grew louder, sinking into my mind, filling every crevice with their chilling warnings. I stumbled back, bumping into the table. The lights began to flicker, casting strange shadows that seemed to move on their own, stretching and contorting as if alive. And then, amidst the tangled whispers, I heard it again, the deep, guttural howl that had haunted me the night before. It echoed through the cabin, shaking the walls, filling the air with a chilling resonance that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I could feel it closing in, pressing against me, suffocating me. Desperate, I shouted into the empty room, "What do you want from me?" But the only answer was the whisper, softer now, almost tender. "They're coming." A sickening dread settled over me, and I realized with growing horror that the cabin wasn't just haunted. It was a trap, a prison of whispers, holding echoes of those who had come before me. And now, I was part of it. When I woke up, a pale, gray light filtered through the cabin's small windows, casting everything in an eerie, lifeless glow. My head throbbed with a dull ache, and I could barely remember how I'd managed to fall asleep. The voices, the flickering lights, the howl. It all felt like a fevered nightmare. But as I looked around, the reality settled in, cold and unforgiving. This wasn't a dream. The cabin was alive with something unnatural, something that seemed to be growing stronger each night. I stumbled to the kitchen to grab my phone and car keys, determined to leave this place for good. But the counter where I'd left them was empty. I frantically searched the small space, my pulse pounding with panic. I was certain I'd left them right there, along with my wallet. Every drawer I opened was empty, every cabinet bare. It was as if my belongings had vanished into thin air. I retraced my steps, checking the bedroom, the bathroom, even under the furniture. Nothing. Anxiety turned to dread as a thought surfaced, one I'd been trying to avoid since reading Thomas's journal. Something doesn't want me to leave. I rushed to the front door, hoping to search the car itself. But when I reached for the knob, my hand froze. Outside, beyond the window, the mist had thickened, swallowing the forest in a suffocating fog. Shadows moved within it, tall and indistinct, blending in and out of focus like figures in a nightmare. I could almost make out faces in the haze, expressions twisted in pain, silent mouths moving as if still trying to scream. For a brief moment, I saw a figure standing just at the edge of the clearing, half hidden by mist. He looked human, with sunken eyes and a hollowed face, his skin pale and stretched taut, like someone drained of life. I recognized him immediately. Thomas, or whatever was left of him. I stumbled back, heart pounding as Thomas lifted his hand, pointing to the cabin with a slow, deliberate motion. His mouth opened, releasing a low, raspy whisper that slithered through the fog, reaching my ears like a curse. "You're next." Panic set in. I yanked at the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the cabin had locked itself, sealing me inside. My head spun as Thomas's image faded back into the mist, and I was left staring at my own reflection in the glass, realizing, with bone-chilling certainty, that I was trapped, another prisoner of the whispering pines. The cabin's walls seemed to close in on me, each creak and groan pressing against my senses, filling the air with the weight of those who had come before me. The whispers were louder now, surrounding me, seeping into my thoughts, pulling me deeper into their suffocating darkness. I didn't know how much time had passed. Hours, days. Every moment felt distorted, like I was drifting through some twisted version of reality, trapped in the cabin's grasp. I needed to escape. Desperation overtook every other thought, and I tore through the cabin, searching for anything that might break the invisible chains holding me here. I threw open drawers, rifled through cupboards, hoping for some clue, some tool that could free me from this nightmare. In a last-ditch effort, I grabbed a rusted fireplace poker and slammed it against the door, forcing it open just enough to squeeze through. Outside, the mist hung low, thicker than before, swallowing every familiar landmark. But I didn't care. I couldn't stay in that cursed cabin any longer. I took off running, my feet pounding against the damp earth as I plunged into the dense forest, the whispering trees closing in around me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the presence behind me, lurking in the fog, following my every step, like the forest itself was alive and unwilling to let me go. The deeper I ran, the louder the whispers grew, merging with the rustling leaves and echoing all around me. "Stay. Don't leave." The voices pleaded, blending with the mournful wind. I pushed forward, my breath ragged, my heart hammering, but the trees stretched on endlessly, a labyrinth with no exit. And then, through the thick fog, I saw it, a flicker of headlights on a distant road, the faint glow of the outside world. Summoning every ounce of strength, I stumbled toward it, fighting the branches that seemed to reach out, grabbing at my clothes, tearing at my skin. My lungs burned, and my legs threatened to give out, but I forced myself to keep moving. Finally, I burst through the last line of trees, tumbling onto the road, gasping for breath. I turned back, half expecting to see the cabin or Thomas's hollow figure staring back at me, but there was only the thick wall of fog, shrouding the forest in silence. I didn't wait. I stumbled down the road, not stopping until I was miles away from Black Forest, and yet, as I drove away, something flickered on my car's dashboard screen. It was a message, chilling, impossible, as if carved by invisible hands. "The pines will remember you." Now, even in the safety of my own home, I sometimes catch a whisper in the breeze, or see a shadow flicker just beyond my line of sight. The pines aren't done with me, and somehow, deep down, I know that one day they'll call me back. Like and subscribe for more videos. Tell me where you're from in the comments.